Greetings wargamers, today we're continuing our series on making cheap scatter terrain and I'm going to show you how to make some Hesco Barriers. Hesco Barriers are those giant bags filled with rocks and sand and earth that you see forming the walls of encampments and bases in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. More effective than sandbags because they can be filled by machines, which means they can be put up much quicker. And you also get several types that can be assembled in big long stretches as well. They're really useful for our war games because we can use them to block line of sight and we can use them to close off sections of the board to break the firing lines from end to end. So let's head over to the bench and get started. For this tutorial you'll need a block to use as the base for your barrier. You can use almost anything for this, but I recommend either a piece of wood or some high density foam like I've got here. I'm going to show you how to make two varieties, one single block and one that's already made up into a length of wall. We'll start with a single barricade. I've already cut this into a 4cm cube. Now Hesco Barriers come in a variety of sizes, from ones that you can see over to massive ones, but the size is really up to you. I find 4cm cubed is a good size because it will provide complete line of sight blocking cover for most miniatures and it doesn't use up too much material. If you want your models to be able to see over the barricade, use between 25 and 30mm, so 2.5 to 3 centimeters. So the first thing we need to do is texture the top of the barricade. Hesco barricades are made by filling giant bags with rocks and sand and earth, so they very rarely have a perfectly flat top. To imitate this, we're just going to take some all-purpose filler, which you can find in any DIY store and most pound or dollar stores, and we're just going to put a layer on the top. Now you can skip this and just PVA the top before applying your grit, but I like to do this step because it adds a little bit of variety to the top surface and stops it from being quite so flat. If you want to stack your barricades and want to make larger wall sections out of them, then just use the PVA method because it will give you a flatter top to make it more stable for when you build up your barricade wall sections. So all you need to do is take your filler, pop it open, get a scoop and put it on top. Now you can either use a tool, but I'm just going to take a scoop on my fingers and just pop some down on the top like so. Not being too careful about this, it's like I said, all we want to do is create a nice uneven surface to stop it looking so manufactured. So like that is an F. Just pop it down. I'm not sure whether you'll be able to see this on the camera or whether it'll be too overexposed, but just pop it down, scrape off the excess of your finger, wipe it on a towel, and then to texture the top, let's just move this filler out of the way. If it'll close, there we go. Now to texture the top, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take some sand, a grit mixture. All this is some very fine play sand, some kiln dried play sand, some coarser sand, and then I've got a selection of small pieces of slate and small stones in here as well. So all we're going to do is going to take our block and just press it down, and there we go, it's textured. Now you might get a few big pieces in there and that's okay, because that'll add some colour variety when we come to painting it. All you need to do now is leave that to dry for 20 to 30 minutes. To simulate the mesh that is placed around Hesco Barriers, we're going to be using this, which is plaster scrim. It's used for joining one or more plaster boards together. Outside of the UK it might be called drywall mesh or something similar. I got this from the local hardware store, but I will leave a link in the description below for anyone who doesn't want to go out and interact with other human beings, which I don't blame you. So we're just going to pop this open and rip it open. Like that. Now this roll cost me £3 and as you can see there is a significant amount of it. so it will go a long way. So I'm just going to find the end of this and then we'll come back. Okay, so now we're going to place the scrim around our barrier. Now this material is a little bit tacky, so it will stick somewhat on its own, but I like to just put a few blobs of super glue down just to help hold it. So all we're going to do is we're going to place, get it in frame, we're just going to place a dot of super glue in each corner and in the centre there. And then we're going to take our scrim and we're just going to press it onto the barrier like that. Now you want to wrap this around twice to make sure that it's nice and secure. So I'm going to do that now and we'll come back. Once you've wrapped the mesh around twice, it's time to cut off the excess. Now you can leave it like this if you want, but I prefer to cut it so it's just at the level of the foam block. Hesco barriers are like giant bags, and when they get filled, I like to have a little bit of the material showing over the top so it looks like the bag has been slightly overfilled. I think it looks a little more realistic this way. So what we're going to do is just going to start cutting in. Cutting around the bag. Cutting the mesh off in line with the top. Like so. Doesn't matter if a bit of the filler comes away, that's not a problem. Just, there we are. Let's wipe away the mess, put that in the bin. And as you can see, it now looks like an actual Hesco barrier. To make the longer wall sections, we're going to follow many of the steps we've just used to create the single Hesco barriers. So start with a long block. This one is 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters by about 120 millimeters. So it's about the length of 3 of the normal blocks. To represent the fact that these are supposed to be separate barriers, we've used matchsticks to just create some separations onto the top of our piece. Once the matchsticks are in place, we're going to do exactly the same as we did before. I'm going to take some filler just on our finger, and we're just going to place some filler onto the tops of each of these sections. Again, we don't need to be neat with it. The only place that you need to be a little bit neater is up against the matchstick, just so that it doesn't cover it. One thing you can do if you prefer, the glue is not quite dry on these matchsticks, so I'm going to take them off, and what we're actually going to do is we're going to spread filler all the way along, all over the top. Don't need to be neat, just get a nice layer on there. Trying to get it off our fingers. Spin it around where you need to. Like that, there we go, just a layer of filler. And then just take your matchsticks and just press them into the filler. If you don't want to PVA them, press them into the filler like that. Once your filler and your matchsticks is applied, we're going to press this piece down into our grit mixture exactly the same as we did with the single Hescos. So we're just going to take our mixture and just press it down in there. And just check if it hasn't covered anywhere, just sprinkle some on. Tap away the excess. Press the edges in where it's not caught properly. Same on both sides. And then try and spread out some of the larger rocks. And press in some more sand. There we are. So now we have the top of this piece done as well. With our grit added to the top, now it's time to move on to add the mesh in exactly the same way we did for the single barrier. So we're going to wrap the mesh around twice and then trim off all the excess. With both barricades built, it's time to move on to painting. To seal everything and make sure the mesh stays in place, we're going to start with a mixture of PVA glue and black acrylic paint with a little bit of water to help it flow. Now the ratio that you want to use for this is about 60% paint to about 40% PVA glue, but you don't have to be precise for this. Let me open that because it's stuck. Just get some paint, that's a little bit watery for some reason. There we go. Just squeeze in a bit of paint and then do the same for the PVA. Just helps if you open it up. Just squeeze in a bit. There we go, come on, out you come. Now, normally I would add a little bit of water just to help it flow, but I think we should be alright because there was that black paint seemed quite runny. So we're just going to get a cheap brush and just mix the PVA and the paint together. Like that. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of newspaper down to keep my cutting mat from getting covered in paint. And then we're just going to take the paint and just start painting it on. Now mixing in the PVA will help keep this mesh stuck down, and it will also help seal in all the sand and the grit as well. So just liberally apply it, making sure to get into all the little squares like that, and go over it a couple of times just to take off the excess. There we are, and then just do this all over for both pieces. Our undercoat is nearly dry and I've just sprinkled some extra sand on the top to give it a little more texture. And now what we're going to do is we're going to give the whole piece a coat of a dark brown. So we just take this, take some dark brown, and we're just going to give the whole piece a good coat of dark brown. To paint the piece, all you need to do is use a selection of brown paints, going progressively lighter in tone with each step. And then if you want to add a little extra detail at the end, you can add a few tufts of grass on top, just to make it look like the barriers have been there for a while and things have started to grow in them. And with the painting complete, the piece is finished. It's a cheap and easy method to get great looking scatter terrain onto your tables, and you can even use it to build up entire emplacements or fortifications. So there you have it, 2 cheap and simple ways to make Hesco barriers to add to your gaming tables to provide your models with cover as they advance across the board. If you plan on using these barriers, let us know in the comments below. And if you've got any pictures of any that you've made, be sure to share them with us on social media. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like below. And if you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you want to keep watching, make sure to check out our concrete barriers tutorial, which you can find here. And until next time, happy wargaming!